Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hello, friends.
Hi, how's it going?
Hello. As always, I am joined by the glamorous and glowing Kate
Glamorous.
Sitars.
Hello. Wow.
Hello, glamorous and glowing. That's you, Kate. And Kate and I have the pleasure to be joined by the glamorous, glowing, all around fabulous CCA student and copywriter, Alex Angst. Hey, Alex.
Hi, thanks for having me. Very excited to be on.
Oh, thank you for joining us. As we were saying before we started recording, I actually couldn't believe that this wasn't a catch-up episode. I was like, this obviously we've talked to Alex before on the pod. We have not. So this is our opportunity to rectify that because Alex, you have been in our orbit. We have been working together through Next Level and all that kind of stuff so long now that
Yeah,
Years now.
years
we've
now.
been on
Yeah.
a journey. Yeah, for
We've
sure.
been on a journey, and it's been a delightful journey. But before we get into that journey, tell us about your journey. Did you see that transition there? Oh,
Oh,
seamless.
that's
Oh my
beautiful.
gosh, it's so good.
I
Um,
love, I love a good transition.
thank you. What is your background? How did you get into copywriting? Where did you come from, and where are you going?
Yeah, so
Cotton
I,
Joe.
oh, I, I grew up within advertising and branding agencies, but I started off on a very different trajectory. I was always on the account side of things. So basically, I was managing scopes and I was running timelines and handling project teams and in charge of client relationships once I kind of worked my way up the ladder. And I got to a point during COVID back in 2020 where I kept being asked the question of whether that was kind of the path that I wanted to continue on. And the next, sort of level for me would have been group account director. And I always had a very visceral reaction to that. And the reaction was, nope, that is not the road that I want to go down. And I kind of got to a point where it needed a little bit of soul searching because if my gut reaction to that question kept being no, then what was it that was actually keeping me in that industry and in that business, right? Like, what was it that I was going to spend the next 3 to 4 decades of my life doing? And I think the main part of the job that I had always really enjoyed was working really closely with creatives, as we call them in the advertising world, and really getting to kind of sit in the rooms where the sausage was being made, getting to work really closely with designers, with strategists, and of course with writers. And at the same time, the more I worked as an account person, the less I felt like I had the time still and the flexibility still to transition over to the copywriting side. And then I think finally, like when COVID happened, I was just like, if I don't do it now, then I'm never going to do it. Everything else is kind of going belly up anyway. Like I might as well try. And so that was sort of what led me to CCA. And, before CCA, like I explored a bunch of other ways of kind of going about it. I looked at, the really expensive like copywriting portfolio programs, and I was working full time. Like I was working 80 hours a week, and I didn't have the time or the money to step away and invest in one of these crazy programs. And I also honestly didn't really think I needed to because one, I don't think anyone really needs to. And two, like I had spent so many years around this field and adjacent fields already. And so I was like, you know what? I want something that is flexible, but really informative, that's going to let me learn from really talented people, meet other people who kind of want to go down the same road. And yeah, that's how I found CCA. And then, I enrolled, I put together kind of a starter portfolio of spec work, shopped it around to a few people in the business that I knew and that I trusted. And then finally got to a point where I'd gotten enough kind of positive reinforcement and feedback on it to quit my full-time job, take a part-time job as an account person to pay the bills and keep the lights on, and then spent the other 50% of my time, which I was very upfront with my agency about, building out an initial client roster. And that was back in 2021. So since then, I've kind of grown into a bit of a boutique copy and content studio. And now I've got an LLC and I call myself Word Up, which is my new
Oh, I love
name,
that. I love
which
it.
yeah. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
I love that. I love that. How did you, I guess maybe, have you always had an affinity for writing or an affinity for, just because as I'm thinking, going from brand side to creative side, do you go copywriting? Do you go down the design road? Do you go,
Yeah.
Mm.
where did that, how did that
Yeah.
decision come for you?
Yeah. I think writing was always something fun that I did in my free time. And I don't know if that's maybe why I didn't immediately think about it as a career path. I kind of fell into accounts because I think people thought I was organized and I was good at talking to people. And also, there was a really big need for account people at the time when I kind of joined the advertising space back in like 2013. But yeah, like writing for me was always a passion play.
Mhm.
And so once I realized, I think that it could also be a really serious career path, especially, as a copywriter, brand writer. Um, I was sort of like, oh, wow, like I wish I had jumped right on this as soon as I got into the ad space, because as soon as that kind of clicked for me, it felt like such a natural road that I could have gone down that I kind of like missed the boat on initially, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but think of how much you learned from the brand side as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That, and
100%.
yeah.
Like there are so many things that I used then that I still use all the time now. Like, for example, thinking about, a project scope, like that was the bulk of my job, right? Like running a client relationship, kind of like delighting clients as you're working with them. I think those are all skills that have really benefited me since I started. And it's interesting because I think those are some of the areas where I hear a lot of other creatives and a lot of other writers kind of pausing, and needing a little bit more time to get ahead of and to learn. And I think I got really lucky because, I had the fortune of working in a job that really exposed me to those things early on. And then, it was the creative side that I kind of had to play catch up on, and develop my muscle within.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that writers can't make any money, that idea that
Yeah.
somehow so many of us have picked up, that even though you were in an industry where you were seeing people every day make a living as a writer, it
Yeah.
still took a little bit of time to click for you. That
Yeah.
overriding message, maybe not overriding, but I don't know, in the back of your mind, message was so strong that it took
Yeah.
time for that connect.
Totally. And I think, the other part of it that was so intimidating for me was seeing where these people were coming from. A lot of the
Mm.
copywriters that I was working with, agency side, had fancy degrees from places like a Miami Art School or like a creative circus. And they had years and years of incredible portfolio work to support them. And, again, I think those observations were the things that made me go, well, I missed my shot. Like,
Mm.
I didn't do that when I was back in school. Like, I didn't slide right in there as a junior creative. I'm 30 and it's too late, which sounds so ridiculous now when I say it out loud, looking back, because I don't think it's ever too late. Like, I truly, truly don't. My mom, as a side note, embarked on her dream career when she was 55 and has
Wow.
built that into an incredible business. So, yeah, I truly don't think it's ever too late. I'm very glad that I didn't listen to myself and kind of, chose to go down that road when I did.
Yeah. Well,
A
that's the
real feeling,
typical,
though.
yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
comparing our chapter one with somebody else's
Mhm.
chapter 20, right?
Oh, oh yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
I'm curious we've talked to probably like over 100 CCA students now at this point, and you're the first person that I can recall that like, okay, I'm going to take what I'm doing right now as a part-time job while I use the other
Yeah.
50% of my time, which I think is so, so smart. Can you talk a little bit about, were you still building out your skills with that 50% of the time? Were you starting to land work? What were some of your first projects? All of that sort of thing.
Hey there, it's Nikki. I wanted to take a very quick minute to make sure that you knew about our free on demand copywriting training. Now, whether you are brand new to copywriting or you've been doing it for a while, but you just can't seem to hit those income goals, this training is for you. You are going to learn the 3 secrets to landing freelance copywriting work without relying on frustrating job bidding sites like Upwork or Fiverr, or without cold calling strangers. And if you've watched any of the student success stories on this channel, and if you haven't yet, check them out. amount, this is the exact same training that they all started with. And I mean students like Kate Kay, who is making 6 figures, working part-time, and retired her husband to help her build her business. Students like Stuart, who replaced his full-time salary, which was a good one, with his freelance income and then some. Stacy, who hit 6 figures in her first 6 months as a freelance copywriter, and Ashley, who landed the in-house copywriting job of her dreams. They all started with this free training, and you can start with this free training too. So sign up right now at freecopywritingtraining.com.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I enrolled in CCA in January of, was it 2021? It was around then. And it kind of took me, 5 to 6 months to put an initial spec portfolio together. And I think the other thing that I started to do, and I promise this is segueing into your question, Kate, is I started just telling people what I was doing. And I wasn't telling everyone because obviously, I was in my full-time job and I had to be quite protective of that. But I started saying it out loud to a few people that I knew and that I trusted who were also working in the industry. And I think, as simple as that sounds, that literally planted the seed to one, people who were creative experts looking at my spec work and beginning to give me feedback outside of CCA even. And then 2, people starting to think of me for like easy tasks. Like I think the first person to kind of do that for me was at the time a copy director at my agency, JKR. And she sort of came back to me after I had mentioned it to her, and she was like, hey, I'm working on this one-off project for a friend of mine. They're thinking about launching their own brand. Would you want to spend a couple of hours and just brainstorm headlines with me for their new packaging? And so that was a very like easy, low-hanging opportunity, right? That somebody gave me literally just because I told them what I was doing and what I was excited about. And then things like that kept kind of popping up, right? And then I think 6 months in, I was sort of like, okay, like I'm getting good feedback. Like, seems like I'm not insane for wanting to pursue this. Seems like I kind of like know what I'm doing. And I think around that time too, a recruiter that I had talked to came back around to me and kind of said, look, like, I don't have any copy jobs, but I do have this part-time freelance account director position at another agency. The agency was called Siegel and Gale. If you're interested, knowing that you want to build out your book, I can set you up for an interview. And so that's how I landed that interview 6 months in. And I kind of made the decision to be really honest with that agency right from the jump. And I kind of said, look, like, I will give you all of me for 50% of my time, as long as it's very clear and understood that for the rest of the time, I'm going to be building out this book. And they were kind of like, oh, like building out a book, what do you mean? And I explained it to them and they were like, well, sometimes we get an overflow of comms work. Comms in their world was basically like brand writing, strategic writing. We'll let you know if we do. And then that was ultimately what led to my first freelance agency gig as a writer. So one thing really kind of like folded into another. But yeah, I think to come back to your question, sorry, long story long, like really just saying it to people, saying it out loud. And I think like doing that to the right people as well was what helped me make that transition and do it in a way that felt maybe a little bit safer and more strategic than just quitting my job, right? And taking the plunge.
Exactly.
But I love that you said not even just saying that you were a copywriter, but then saying it too to like when you got that part-time job, like so smart. Like,
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I thought I was kind of crazy, to be honest. I was like, oh, like I'm coming in here talking a big game. But I also really felt like it was one of the things that we had learned pretty early on in CCA. It was like, say that you're a writer, say that you're a copywriter, because you now are. So I think the first shift there is genuinely mental. And if you can make that, and if you have, a bit of skill to back it up, that you can continue to build on and expand, you'll be just fine. But the first shift is mental for sure.
Hmm.
I
Absolutely.
love that. Yeah.
And you never know where projects are going to
Yeah.
come from.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone is listening or watching and thinking, well, okay, but she had like creative directors. She could tell she was a copywriter. She had copy
Mhm.
director. She was shy. But you would be surprised at where, I say that to listeners and viewers,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised at where projects can come from.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you mention it to someone at a cocktail party or at a,
Yeah.
I don't know, kids want talk to one of the other parents at a kids sports event, you would be
Yeah.
surprised at the number of
Get
people who
your
are like,
parents
oh,
to mention it. I feel like my mom
Yeah.
did
exactly.
that once, and it led to one of her friends contacting me, who's like a lawyer for and
Same.
it's like,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
oh, I so and so owns my
yeah.
friend owns a coffee shop and they need new
Yeah.
brochures or posters. It's the speak and obviously there's no promises about serendipities or anything like that, but you can't.
Mhm.
What do they say about the lottery? Like you can't win if you don't play. And I'm also
Hmm.
not saying everybody
Yeah.
don't go spend all your money on the lottery tickets, but for something like this where there's virtually no downside to say, oh, well, this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Say it to people who have the potential to be connected to other people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think that's so true. And I think, I I did also say to people who were not directly involved in advertising and branding, and
Hmm.
like so many other writers that I've met over the last couple of years kind of got their foot in the door that way too, by literally just reaching out to, what we call the warm network and letting people, friends, family, friends of colleagues know what they're up to, right? So I think you just have to say it, yell it, like scream it from the rooftops if you have to, chances are like somebody out there will listen and give
Hmm.
you an opportunity, even if it's a very small one to begin. I think that's all you need, really.
Absolutely. You get a little bit of confidence, you get a piece for your
Yeah.
portfolio, you get paid. It's that
Yeah.
the leap from I haven't had a client yet to I have a client.
Yeah.
It's really not that many steps, and it's not the
Mm-mm.
distance is not that far, but it feels far and it feels
Yeah.
like a big step. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It feels like a massive step. And then I think once you get your first client and word kind of gets around and things snowball, it can also move really, really quickly. So sometimes I think back to that like brief period between kind of getting started and getting the word out there and getting my first like paid opportunity, which was like a month-long copy and content scope for a friend's startup agency. um, I think back to that period and I'm kind of like, oh, that was that was nice. When things were kind of like slowly ramping up and I still had time to really like think and consider what I was doing and I wasn't like running full steam ahead all the time, which I say in like the best and most positive ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's true.
Talk to us
Yeah.
about full steam ahead, because did I
Yeah.
just see that you had work that was in Times Square? Am I making that up? I
Oh,
feel like, yeah. What?
yeah.
That's so
I was like,
exciting.
I was like, I just get on the train to New York and like,
Oh my God. Um, it was really exciting. It was a personal milestone for me for sure. Like this sounds very corny, but I came to New York for the first time when I was 16, and that place in Times Square was literally the first spot I went to, and I like stood there with my best friend from high school, fresh off the plane from California, and I was kind of looking up at that big tower that they have with like the
Mhm.
three prime ad spots on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like that is cool. And at the time, I didn't really want to be a writer. I actually wanted to work in fashion editorial. So I was thinking about it differently. And I was like, oh, how cool to like style a fashion campaign that goes up there. But still, like I was looking at that slot and I was like, oh, how sick to like be up there. And then I went back when the campaign that you mentioned went live a couple of months ago. And I looked up and I was like, it's not a fashion campaign, but it's a campaign. And I wrote it. So
Yeah.
that felt really good. And the opportunity also kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. Like, I didn't go into that job knowing that that's where it was going to go.
Sure.
It was actually positioned to me first as a brand strategy job because I also do some work in brand strategy, which ends up leading into messaging and copy quite a lot of the time. And then that job, which was for Samsung ads, so the ads division of Samsung, ended up morphing into a like straight advertising job. So like very punchy, very headline driven, supported with taglines, very campaign focused. So once that happened, I was sort of like, oh, this is different, but cool pivot. Like, let's go for it. And then I saw the ad buy and saw where it was going to be. And I was sort of like, oh, like, no way, there's no way. And then that's where it was. And it went up during ad week, which was really fun. So yeah, I went out there during ad week and my poor husband had to film a bunch of videos of me standing in front of it. But yeah, that was really exciting for sure.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
Congratulations. I saw that on LinkedIn. I was like, oh my God, like,
thank you.
So cool. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's one thing to see your words in print or on a screen or something, but it's another thing to see them
in lights,
massive, in such an iconic place. That's so incredible. Congratulations.
I don't think there is like that is that it's like the Mount Kilimanjaro of advertising. I feel like where else could you see your work that would have,
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And the team that I worked on with it was really phenomenal too. And I think like that's a part of doing all this that's been so lovely as well. Like just getting to work with the most like incredible strategists, creatives, designers, across different agencies that I never would have been exposed to otherwise. So that work was done with an entertainment agency based here in New York called Loyal Casper. And I was able to work very closely with their creative director on it. And then we obviously worked closely with the team over at Samsung Ads, and they helped us come up with the initial concepts and were just so lovely and so enthusiastic the entire time that we were working on everything, which isn't always the case. Not to talk badly about clients, but you never know what you're going to get. So not only was that a nice milestone, but like the journey to getting there with the agency team and the client team was really seamless and like such a fun collaboration. Couldn't have been better.
Oh, that's so cool. Now, you are working with multiple agencies. Have you been tempted to go on staff in an agency? Has anybody tried to lure you on staff?
I'm sure they have. I know they have.
There's one place that I've been tempted to go on staff at. And I don't know if they're ever going to see this, but if they do, they will know exactly who they are. And there was a position open there a couple of years ago that I interviewed for. And I ended up getting into the final round. And I was pretty sure I had it. And turns out I didn't. Spoiler alert, I'm still here. Independent. But the person who ended up getting that job had like a decade of experience as a very seasoned writer in the advertising world and was probably better suited to it than I was, to be completely honest, just because of the amount of experience that they had and the amount of like perspective, right, and versatility that they were able to bring to the job. So yeah, that's the one time that I really thought about going full time. And I think it was just because I was going through like a bit of a phase where freelance life was lonely and I missed going into an office. I'm very social, in case you couldn't tell, I'm an extrovert. So I like interacting with and talking to people. And I was just sort of like, man, this is hard. Like it's like day after day at my desk in my office at home, and also that agency was just really special, like it was just one of those moments where like the chemistry was there on every project and they really made me feel like part of the team. And it's so nice when that happens because as a freelancer, it's not always the case, right? Sometimes you very much feel like kind of your own piece on the side. But yeah, I think apart from that, I've never really been tempted. There are maybe some brands where like if they came around and asked, I would think about, but agency side, no, not since then.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm talking about a first love. I'm like being all
if he ever came back. Yeah.
No, but that got away.
Yeah. No, I hear you on the wanting to be in an office. The funny thing is, personally, there are days that I want to be in an office and other days I think, oh, thank God I don't have to go into office. I want to go into an office where everybody else has to be there, but I only go in when I feel like going in. And I don't think that's very likely is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like having that flexibility, you mean?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
but also where everybody else has to be there all the time in case I come in spur of the moment and I
Oh,
want everyone to be there. Of
and they're just
course.
like,
Yeah.
Nikki, we've been waiting for you.
Exactly. The office comes alive. There's like cake in the break room. It's, the kitchen. Yeah, exactly.
I'm with you though. I
It's kind of
get
fun.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's pros and cons for sure. I think there are so many benefits to being able to work from home and like
Mhm.
half the flexibility of, being independent. And
Yeah.
I also think, if there's one thing I've learned, like good creative work takes a certain amount of, I'm about to sound really dramatic here, like solitude, and space,
That's true. Yeah.
to really let things marinate and to consider. And you don't always get that when you're working in an office full time. In fact, it's really tough. And it's interesting, like every once in a while when I'm collaborating with a team, I'll go into their office for like a day or two, right, to kind of do heads down work with the team. And it's draining. Like I leave there at the end of the day and I'm like, oh, like I feel like I've just run a marathon. I'm not used to it anymore,
Yeah.
and I don't get nearly as much done.
Yeah.
It's important to building the relationship, but like in terms of the amount of work I actually do, like it doesn't really compare for me to what I get done when I'm here at home in this space,
Yes.
like going heads down on something. So there's that.
It
Yeah.
completely changes the scope of the project. Speaking of scope, like if I'm with other people surrounding me, like, okay, this is going to take easily double the time just by virtue, and it might come out better or like whatever, but like it's just timing wise, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very big ask.
Yeah. Yeah. You go in periodically to work with the team members. Do you ever go in for like initial meeting? I'm just curious as to whether your clients ever want you to come in for initial meetings, or is it mostly over Zoom?
Yeah. Initial meetings, not so much. I think those usually happen over Zoom or whatever platform they're using.
Yeah.
I think usually, if it's a team, whether it's agency side or brand side, and they're based in New York, the first presentation or like leading up to the first big presentation will kind of be when people will ask if I'm able to come in. And then sometimes also after the fact, like when a project is close to wrapping or when a project is just wrapped, people will be like, oh, like, would you come in? Would you do like a project debriefing? Would you come hang out and meet some of us in person? And that's always really lovely because it's so nice to like actually be in the same physical space as, oh, bless you, Kate, as, the people that you've collaborated with. So it happens.
Yeah. It's, everybody's experience is different. Of course, I was just curious as to what you're saying. And you live close enough to most of your clients that you can do that. Obviously, if you have clients across the country, that's going to be a little bit trickier. But it is a nice opportunity to go in and be like, oh, this is what the offices look like outside of that little square on Zoom. Like, oh.
Do you have any fun
100%.
office perks?
I'm
curious.
Great snacks for sure. Some very cute animals. One of the agencies that I work with, they're called Co-Collective. They have an in-office dog policy, and they will bring a bunch of dogs in, and the dogs are like running around off leash, and they're very cute and very lovely. And clients seem to love them too, which is so great. I have a dog as well, so I've brought him in a couple of times, which is awesome. And then I think, just being able to get a sense of how people sort of show up and operate in person. I know that's not like a fun office perk in the traditional sense, but it's such a benefit to like understand how people come together, how people communicate with each other in person, what the energy is like in a war room, right? When you're working on a creative concept or putting a last minute deck together, whatever it is, like it helps you understand how that place runs and functions and what to kind of pull out of your own bag of tricks to make sure that you're collaborating and leading the work in the most helpful way to that team, because every team is so different, right? And has its own way of working and its own personality. So yeah, I think, going in person is always a massive benefit when I'm close enough to do it and when I'm able to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had talked a little bit earlier about how your moving from brand side to creative has given you kind of a leg up in some ways when it comes
Yes.
to actual client relations as a
Yeah.
copywriter. And I realize I'm kind of putting you on the spot. So we'll edit this out if you're like, I have nothing.
Yeah.
Are there any tips that you can offer copywriters who are listening when it comes to how they work with their clients or things to
Yeah.
look out for, things to bear in mind?
Yeah. Oof. I mean, there's a lot. I think, it's so important at the outset of any project to get really clear on what the client is looking for. And that might sound really obvious, but I think a lot of the time, clients, especially if they're not necessarily super experienced in the world of brand, will ask for one thing when they really need another, right?
Mm,
So, to give you an example of that, right? When I first started, I had quite a few clients approach me for website copy, right? And then when I would do a little bit of digging and kind of ask them what foundational materials they had to support that, which is sort of how I think as
no.
a
Yeah.
brand strategist too, right? It would become clear that sometimes they didn't really have a voice. They didn't really have that foundational brand messaging to back it up, right? So the conversation would pivot from something that was really executional in scope to something that was a little bit deeper and again a little bit more strategic maybe, but would then set them up for success long term, right? So I think like listening really carefully, really digging into what materials the client has to give you, like what you're working from, what you're building on together, and being able to be the expert in the room who can kind of say, hey, like if you're looking for a website copy that is evergreen, that is distinct to your brand, that speaks directly to your customer, these are the kind of foundational inputs that will get us there, right? So this is where we need to start in order to get to what you actually want to do.
Hmm.
So that's important. And then I think just being organized, like being able to think about timelines, being able to think about who has to be in the room when, what kind of feedback you need from who at which points in time. I find that sometimes client teams are so stretched that they don't necessarily think through all of those things. And so it's really helpful to be able to think not only creatively, but to be able to really think about it from almost like a project manager's perspective, right? And think about like the workflow and the structure that is supporting the creative that's being brought to life. I sound so serious when I'm talking about this. I'm really just talking about organization.
No, but it
But
makes
yeah,
sense. I mean,
It's so
I
true.
completely agree.
yeah,
Is that sometimes you have to be, it's not it, not the word that came to mind was advocating for yourself, and that's not really it, speaking of serious words, but just knowing what you're gonna need in order to get the job
Get it
done.
done. Yeah.
yeah,
And you learn that really quickly when you get into a meeting
yeah,
and you're like, okay, so thanks for all the feedback. I'm gonna do another round. And they're like, well, actually don't, because the most important person couldn't be in this meeting and we have to show it to him first or her
yeah,
first, and then we'll give you feedback. And then you understand that you're going to be getting feedback third person because
yeah,
because of this snafu and you didn't know. You learn these things
yeah,
very quickly, but so much better if you don't actually have to
yeah,
experience that.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And then of course, I think there are things that you only kind of learn by doing, by getting
Yeah.
into some really like uncomfortable situations. But yeah, I think getting deep with the client on what they actually need and then approaching it with like a PM's mindset to start are really, really helpful things.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's so true. I have a client right now that's I think they're the client's instinct, it seems to me, the default is to execution. We need this, let's get
Mhm.
it done, and it just needs to happen. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And once you
Yeah,
pump the brakes, I think it can feel uncomfortable to pump the brakes for them.
yeah,
But 9 times out of 10, they don't need something, maybe 99 out of 100. They don't need it on the timeline that they think they need it if it's going to be done
yeah,
right and done well.
Hmm. But
yeah.
I think something that we can sometimes forget as individual contributors is that with our clients, it's obviously if you're working for a one person business, it's different, but there are lots of different layers in a company or an agency. And just because the contact that you are talking to is saying, yes, 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 we need to have this immediately because someone told them that, yes, 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 we have to need, and because someone told them that, because someone told them we need this immediately, because someone told that person, hey, we need this soon. Someone told that person we need it in the next 2 weeks. Someone told that person
performance review is coming up and they need a bullet for their performance.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation with a client of mine the other day, and they were basically telling me that they need something by, mid-January. And we were talking about kind of, working around the Christmas holidays that are coming up. And it was helpful to dig into that and kind of understand what's driving that deadline. And it turns out that they're basically like submitting a bunch of work for an award cycle that could potentially have massive impacts on their business. And so that's what's driving the deadline, right? So like, digging into that and understanding that tension is super helpful because it makes me go, oh, okay, like there's a lot on the line for you here. I get you. Like, let me support you on the way there, which is such a different mindset to have from, someone coming to you and saying, I need this done ASAP, like get it in right after the holidays. And you're sort of like, oh, like, don't love this for myself. Like now I'm just kind of working in crunch time and I don't really know why. And I don't really know like what it's for at the end of the day. Yeah. So understanding like the end purpose of it is a good place to be for sure.
That's so true. And then I think that there's an opportunity too. I had a client the same, that it was like a webinar was driving this deadline. They had this big presentation, whatever. And I said, okay, good to know. So we'll do this before the webinar, but then once that goes live, we can do like a phase 2 of the project. And here's what we can do after. And so then, it led to more work, which is always great. But B, like it was, okay, everyone can win basically of like, we can put our best foot forward before and after.
Totally. That's actually another really important thing too, Kate, like being able to kind of think beyond an initial project deadline and think through what the build looks like, what phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 looks like, because I think, a lot of clients are so stretched and so busy that they're kind of running towards the initial deadline, right? And it helps when someone from a third party perspective can kind of come in and say, okay, like now that we've gotten your website copy done, let's talk about how that flexes, right, into social copy. Let's talk about how that flexes into campaign copy. Let's talk about how we build you an evergreen content bank so that you can populate those assets for the next 3 to 5 years moving forward. I don't know, kind of thinking out loud here. But yeah, like I think that's helpful for the client. And it's also really helpful for us as business owners because that way we're constantly kind of looking at how we can grow those relationships and like grow the scope of work, right?
Well, and put the work to work for them, but really like, not, okay, we created this thing, great. Like, how are you getting traffic to it? Or who's coming to it? How are they like all of that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and it comes down to being that, and this is oversimplifying it, but if someone is kind of thinking, how do I wrap my mind around this? It is that difference between being a producer and being a partner. A producer in the sense of like, I just produce, I just execute.
Totally.
You give me a project, I maybe ask some questions, maybe I don't, and I spit out copy at you. Versus saying, okay, let me see the full scope of this project. Let me understand what's driving this. Let me understand the teams involved. Let me understand the goals involved. All of that kind of thing. Always a client is going to be, well, maybe not always if you have a kind of a cruddy client, but a good client, the kind of client you want to build a relationship with, is going to be the kind of client that is going to want a partner, someone that they can lean on. And when they have a partner, that's someone they come back to again and again and again. They don't come back to, I mean, maybe every once in a while they come back to like, okay, oh, we need some copyright, send it to so and so. But when they find a partner in us, they rely on us and they come back to us and they utilize us, and the scope can grow in a good way. Like you were saying, Alex, with the project that was initially, hey, we need a website. And then it was, no, we need so much more. They do that when they know that they can trust us, trust our skills, and trust the way that we care for them as a client.
Totally. I mean, it's a business proposition at the end of the day, right? Like I think any copy project, no matter how small it starts, is more than just a creative ask. Like it's something that should be driving business at the end of the day. So it's helpful to understand like where else the gaps are from that perspective and like kind of counsel the client on how they can fill them through that work. Yeah. And I think, sometimes it is tricky, especially with clients that don't necessarily see me, you, as a true thought partner to start, but really do just kind of treat their writer or their strategist as the executor. But I also think it's very possible to transition yourself into that role over time, right?
100%.
By always doing that like extra due diligence of looking at what else might they need, how else can we strengthen this, like how can we make sure this lives and performs long term, and having those conversations with the client. And if the client doesn't want to hear it in the moment, fine, at least you tried, at least you put it out there, right? I think that's the most that you can do, but I think that's the job, right? Like that's kind of what we owe our clients as thought partners and creative collaborators.
Yeah. And it also makes our job so much more fun. To
Yeah.
just sit and write copy is, and don't get me wrong, I love writing copy. But also, if the job were just receiving a creative brief, writing copy, and sending it through, that would be massively boring.
Yeah.
It is the
Yeah.
higher level strategy. It's digging into the questions within the creative brief, the questions that the creative brief only hints at or only opens up. That's what a big part of what, and then collaborating with people is a big part of what makes the job so fun and so interesting.
100%. Like, what's the emotional truth, right, of what we are writing, and how does that ultimately affect the customer response and then the bottom line of the business that we're writing for? Like, I actually think it's so fascinating and it's so psychological when it really comes down to it, because most persuasive things are. And it really has the capacity to dramatically change someone's business. Like, I'll never forget one of the first projects I worked on as like a fully like independent freelancer. I got to work with a motion strategy and design studio that's based up in Canada. And they had basically spent almost a decade growing their business. They were working with really big clients. Their work was incredibly well received and like really moved the needle for the businesses that they were partnering with. But their brand wasn't really reflecting that yet. And so they were looking to put a team of people together that could sort of take their brand from like the 1.0, as they called it, to the 2.0, and basically like make sure that their brand and the way that they were talking to people was in line with what their business was capable of and like how they wanted to continue to grow, right? So really like carving out runway for them to continue to expand. And that's what we spent the next year working on together. And I think they've like doubled their revenue in a year since it launched. I'm not saying that that is all because of the work I did on it.
No, but you clearly contributed.
It's a contribution to that. So like it's amazing when you can see that impact and it really like affect how people respond to it.
That's really cool. Yeah. I think we get it. It can be easy to forget when we're in the like, all right, you have to send this. I have this. I have to be on this call, and then I have to send this through this client, and then I have this. Like, it can be easy to forget the larger impact, the way that we can help businesses. And when we help a business, we help all the people who work for that business, and we help all the families of those people who work for the business. And then we help all the people who are purchasing the products or service from that business. It's our little job, but not really little, but you know what I'm saying. It has such a major impact. It's amazing.
Totally. It's the ultimate creative ripple effect, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Alex, this has been so much fun. And and quite frankly, apologies to everybody watching and listening. We obviously should have had Alex on much sooner. That's on me. And you will be hearing from Alex again very soon. We will definitely do another episode with her. Yes. But Alex, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight and your story and your not to sound like The Bachelor, but your journey into copywriting. But
thank you so much. It was honestly so much fun. And I've been really looking forward to this because I mean, you two are where it started for me. So much appreciated. Feels like a bit of a full circle moment, which is very nice. So
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thank you for letting us be a part
Yeah.
of your journey. And actually, before I forget, if
Yeah.
anybody's listening and they're like, "Ooh, she's amazing. I want to hire her," or "Hey, the agency I'm working at is looking for another writer to help out." How can people find you?
Oh, yeah. So I am findable on LinkedIn under Alexandra Angst, full name, Angst. Yes, that is my real last name. And
Very
my
mellow for being so angsty.
I know, I really feel like I should be scarier or more anxious. Or my website, which is under Word Up Studio. So wordup.studio.
Excellent. And we'll put that in the show notes so anybody can so
Mhm.
anyone and everyone can find that easily. Yes. But Alex, we will absolutely have you back. Count on it. And thank you so much for joining us today. So much fun.
Thanks. Thanks again. Stay warm, please.
Will
And
do.
happy writing.
Thank you. And with that, we will catch you all in the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.